Hello guys, welcome back again to my YouTube channel. My name is Abiola, and in today's tutorial we're creating the skirt you have on the thumbnail as well as at the beginning of this video. And without wasting time, let us dive into the tutorial of today. First things first, let us talk about fabric choice. The fabric of choice for this project is sunray fabric. Both fabrics on the table are sunray fabrics, but one of them is stretchy and one is not. One is thick and one is not. The one we are working with is stretchy and it is thicker than the usual sunray fabric in the market. So please, the one on my right hand side is what we'll be making use of. I brought out the two of them so that I don't keep getting questions like that. I made use of about 2 to 2.5 yards of this fabric. Okay, the first thing we're going to mark is 0.5 inch seam allowance. This 0.5 inch seam allowance is what we're going to use to join the skirt to the waistband. After marking the 0.5 inch, I'll proceed to connect the point. My waistband is going to be 1 inch in width, so I'm going to place that 1 inch on that 0.5 allowance before I mark my hip point. So as you can see, I'm placing 1 inch and I'm going ahead to mark my 10 inches hip point. If you're wondering, your hip point is your waist to the widest part of your hip, and mine is 10 inches. I'm going to go ahead to label that point hip point. The next measurement is my waist to the floor. I measured from my waist to the floor, like I made sure my tape was touching the floor, and what I have is 43 inches. So I'm going to go ahead now to mark 43 inches. I'll proceed to connect the points and label that skirt length. Okay, now the next step is to add extra inches to the skirt length. This extra inches we're about to add is responsible for the ruch that you see on the skirt, so you have to increase the length. Let's just say the amount of extra inches you add is directly proportional to how ruched your skirt will be. So the more the inches you add, the more ruched your skirt will be. At this point guys, I went ahead to add 3 inches, and later on whilst cutting on my fabric, I felt this might not be ruched enough for me. So whilst cutting on the fabric, I ended up adding extra 5 inches. Okay, so you can watch the part where I cut so you can see me adding my extra 5 inches. So I would label this extra inches, okay, but I later added more. That's what I'm trying to say. Then I'll go ahead to add my hemming allowance, which is 2 inches. I'll proceed to connect the point and label. Since we'll be working with a stretchy fabric, there will be no need for side seam allowance, so I'll divide my waist circumference, which is 30 by 4, which gives me 7.5. That is what I would mark. Then I'll proceed to my hip line. My hip circumference is 40 divided by 4 gives me 10 inches. Then I'll proceed to connect the points with the straightest part of my curved ruler. You can also use a ruler, it doesn't matter. I would also go to the skirt length and divide my hip circumference, which is 40 by 4, and mark the same 10 inches I marked on my hip line, and I'll mark the same thing on the hemming allowance line, and I'll connect all the points together. The next step is to cut out as shown. Please pay attention guys. For the back part of the skirt, you can decide to just cut it on fold as well, because this skirt does not require any zipper. The reason why I cut mine this way is because 1, I needed to get that my usual bum curve. I really wanted that bum curve to be there. 2, I wasn't sure the inspiration had a slit, as I couldn't see the back of the skirt, so I made provision for that by cutting this way. This implies that if I decide to put a slit to the skirt, I can do that. That is the reason why I ended up cutting mine this way. First things first, proceed to mark 1.5 inch from beginning to the end of this paper. Mark 1.5 inch and connect the points with your straight ruler. Then place the front skirt pattern on top of it and go ahead to pin it in place. Elongate the lines or lengthen the lines from beginning to the end as well. On the waistline, proceed to mark 1 inch. Okay, then at the hip area, proceed to mark 1.5 inch. Guys, if you know you have a very big bum bum, or you're making this for someone with a big bum bum, you could mark 2 inch at that point, okay? But for me, 1.5 inch always works, okay? Then I'm going to come down from this point by 5 inches, okay? And on that point, I'm going to mark 1 inch as well, and I'm going to connect as well, connect from that hip area to this point. Then at the skirt length area, I'm going to take 1 inch as well, and on the hemming allowance area, I would mark 1 inch as well, and I would use my long ruler to connect from the skirt length area to 5 inches below the hip point. And the next step is to cut out as shown. On the waistline, I'm going to come down by 1/2 inch and connect that to the side seam area using my curved ruler, and I'm going to proceed to cut out using scissors. Now I'm going to label the front skirt pattern, and we are cutting just one piece of this, and we are cutting on fold. This is the back skirt pattern. We're cutting 2 pieces of this, and yeah, now let's cut out. Basically, you're going to fold your fabric first, place your front pattern on top of it. Like I explained earlier, I told you guys I added 5 inches extra to the length of the skirt so that I can get enough ruch. Okay, if you like mine, then you could, do the same thing I did. After pinning them down, I went ahead to cut out the pattern. The next step is to fold the fabric into 2 again. Place your back pattern on top of it, pin as shown before, okay? Then proceed to add the same 5 inch extra to the length of the skirt, to aid the ruching. Note, this is my preference. You can add less than 5 inches or more than 5 inches, just depends on you. Then I'll proceed to cut out. Now let's begin to sew. I'm going to place the back pattern right sides facing each other, and I'm going to go ahead to stitch this area using 1 inch seam allowance, which I'm going to mark before going. I'll also go ahead to pin it down using my clips. You can use your pins if you don't have clips, and I'll stitch 1 inch from beginning to the end. Then I'm going to go ahead to place the back pattern on the table, right side facing up, then place the front pattern on top of it, right sides facing down. That's right sides facing each other basically, and I'm going to clip them from beginning to the end, and I'm going to mark 1 inch seam allowance, which is what I'm going to use to stitch it from beginning to the end. If you can eyeball 1 inch, just go ahead to your sewing machine and join the sides using 1 inch allowance. Now let's work on our straps. I have 3 straps on this table. One is going to serve as a channel for the ruch, and the remaining 2 will serve as ropes. Okay, now this is the one for the ruch, and it's as long as 29 inches, but we'll only be using 20 inches from this. Okay, and it is 2 inches wide. For the ropes, they are very long, but at the end of the day I realized that they were too long, so I have 54 inches here, but you could reduce yours to 40 inches. They are 1.5 inches wide, so you're going to fold them this way, okay, and stitch at the wrong side using 0.25 seam allowance. Okay, these are the ropes for the ruch. Okay, and for this other rope, because we are making use of 2 ropes, it's also 54 inches long and 1.5 inches wide. Over to the waistband. The waistband should be about 1.5 inches wide. I know mine is showing 2 inches at this point, but I later reduced it. And for the length of the waistband, just measure your waist plus 2 inches. My waist is 30 plus 2 inches. I should have 32 there, but I have more than that. That's not a big deal. I'm going to, cut it out later. As usual, my motto on this channel is it's better for it to be more than less. You can always cut it out. I'll go ahead to iron my waistband on fold, and then I'll reduce it to the 1.5 inches I want it to be. Remember, my waistband is 1 inch plus 0.5 inch joining allowance. That's why it is 1.5 inch. Now it's time to join the waistband to the skirt. You will need to loosen the zipper area a bit in order to attach your waistband. There is no need for an interfacing on this, except the interfacing is stretchy. If it's not, do not use it on this. Now bring your skirt, place your waistband on top of it, right sides facing each other. You can go ahead to stitch it down round or pin it down round basically. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now and pin mine, and I'll show you what it looks like. After pinning down, I would head over to my sewing machine and stitch it round. And basically, here's what I have when I came back from my sewing machine. And yes, here is the excess at the waistband, like I told you guys. So I'm going to go ahead now and cut it off. Because this fabric is very thick, I'll also go ahead to trim off the excess allowance after joining the waistband, because I don't want a bulge after fixing my waistband, you get. So I'm going to go ahead to trim that off now. Then I'll proceed to do my stitch in a ditch method. I'm going to try my best to explain that stitch in a ditch method properly, but if you still do not get it on this video, please watch my other skirt tutorials. That is the method I always use for my waistband. I'll have them linked in the description box, guys. Okay, so after cutting off my allowance, I'll go ahead to fold in my waistband just the way I'm showing you. You fold it in this way and stitch from the front in the ditch. Okay, so see the way I'm folding it now. Whilst folding it, I would use my pin to just illustrate. You pin from the front. See the way I pin the front, and then you stitch in that hole in the front. Or just see the way I'm stitching it on my sewing machine. I'll just fold in the waistband and continue stitching from the front. So you're stitching from the front, but you keep folding from the back. I hope that is explanatory. If it's not, please watch my other skirt tutorials, like I said. Okay, so this is how it looks like when I was done. I'm going to go ahead now to take half of my waist measurement, like the midpoint of the skirt, basically. So fold your skirt into two and mark the midpoint. It will all make sense soon. So after marking the midpoint, you're going to go ahead to place that fabric that will cut out for the ruch. I mean the one that was that is 2 inches in width, okay, which is this one. So you're going to fold it at the top just to close the rough edge, then place it on top of the waistband and pin the midpoint like this. Can you see? So I'll go ahead now to just make sure you follow that midpoint down. This fabric is very easy to work with since it has lines. So follow the line, follow that midpoint down and pin your fabric from beginning to the end. Now this place, you have to determine how long you want your ruch to be. For me, like I said, I used 20 inches, about 19.5 to 20 inches. That is what I used. I'm going to measure it now so that you guys will see what I'm talking about. I wanted about 20 inches. So when pinning, note that you're pinning only the front skirt part. You're not pinning it with the back. A nice tip is to loosen the back area very well to enable easy attachment. Now after getting my 20 inches, I'll go ahead to fold the edge of the last part as well and pin it down so that when I go to stitch it at the sewing machine, I can close the rough edge. You don't want any rough edge sticking out. Okay, the next step is to stitch this from beginning to the end at that midpoint, just the way I'm showing you. Okay, then after that, you're going to fold the other edges inwards just to create your channel, but at least you don't still want a rough edge. So you're going to fold it from beginning to the end as well, just a very little, you know, allowance. Okay, very little, about 0.25, and you're going to stitch very close to the end. Okay, so that means we're going to have a little space in between where our rope can pass in. So at the other side as well, you're going to do the same thing. You fold the edge using about 0.25 allowance and stitch very close to the end. Let me just pin the beginning part so that you just get what I mean. So you're stitching very close to the end at this side, and you're stitching very close to the other end at the other side as well, but this time around doing it from beginning to the end. So just take your time, basically take your time. Now over to the ropes. I'm going to go ahead to trim off any excess allowance at the point, and since this is a very thin rope or thin strap, I'm going to use my broomstick to flip it to the right side. This might take a long time. You just have to be patient. If you have a strap turner, even better for you. So go ahead and flip your straps to the right side, the two of them, and when you're done, just go to your ironing table to iron them flat. Okay, now I'm going to use my safety pin to pass in one of the straps through the space that we left for that ruch, the part I told you guys to stitch the other time. So I've passed the first rope through the ruch using my safety pin. Yeah, exactly, this is what you should have when you pass your rope. I'm going to go ahead to pass the second rope through the channel as well. And yeah, after doing that, the next step is to stitch this point, but you must make sure the rope is well hidden inside. You don't want the rope coming out. Okay, so you have to allow it go in, drag it a bit, then pin it down, take it to your sewing machine and stitch. Look at what I have, guys. Look at what I have. It's looking nice. Now the next step is to do the last part of this tutorial. Like, I'm so excited, we're about to come to the end. I'm going to come down by 5 inch, okay, and I'll use my chalk to note that 5 inch. Then I'm going to ruch this part using needle and thread, like as if you are gathering it with your needle. You know, when we do gathers with our needle, exactly, just form a, you know, running stitch basically at this place, or a basic stitch, whatever you call it, just form it here. Okay, so make sure you carry it out in a straight line, and when you get to the edge where that rope is at, you know, stitch it together. Make double stitches so that it is very, very tight. This might be a bit difficult, you know, since the fabric is actually heavy, so you need a really long needle for this part. Just stitch it very well so that it does not loosen, okay, when you wear your skirt. And guys, when you're done with that, cut your thread and hem your skirt basically. And we've come to the end of this tutorial. Hit the like button if you enjoyed watching, subscribe if you haven't, and turn on post notifications so that you'll be the first to receive new tutorials when I post them. Bye.